summer, step into the Mediterranean haven of Malta. Crystal clear waters, ancient ruins, and towering cliffs. The iGaming industry is converging in Malta to take on everything from green courses, the hottest tournament tables, courts, lanes, and of course, the UNESCO city of Valletta for iGaming Next 2023. A week-long festival experience rounding up with the biggest high-end European pool party, Showers, celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Join over 4,000 senior delegates and top affiliates from all around the world alongside industry giants for an unforgettable iGaming festival week. iGaming Next 2023. Contact our sales team for sponsorship opportunities.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of iGaming Next Weekly News Live. Unfortunately, Nico never lets you down. Janssen has let you down today, viewers. He's got back-to-back meetings, so he's no longer able to join me and Connor. So there'll be no 10 and 5, I'm afraid. But to soften the blow, Connor is back with us after his holiday in Tenerife. How did it go, Connor?
It was amazing. Thanks for asking, Jake. Part-timer Nico letting us down there, but never mind. He's a very busy and very important man, so fair enough. But yeah, I just got back on Monday night, Tuesday morning. Got back from Tenerife. That's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. I was blown away by it. You may remember last year. Was it last year? Yeah, last summer. I was on a game show here in the UK on television, and I won as one of my prizes, one of many prizes. My housemate and I won 5 nights all inclusive in Tenerife. So we finally got round to going, and it was absolutely astonishing. It's a really beautiful island. My first time in the Canary Islands. I thought it was amazing. Got to dust off the old Espanol for a bit of fun. That was nice. But basically, it was an all-inclusive hotel that we stayed in. So I just spent 5 days eating and drinking. And Nico says I'm looking fresh. You may notice I've got a bit of colour. My natural colour is actually a kind of light blue. So this is actually me with a tan. So there you go. Yeah, it's been great, actually. How was your week?
Yeah, it was okay, thanks, mate. Same as normal, nothing as exciting as that. And we should tell viewers you were on Strike It Lucky with Alan Carr, the kind of
That's right.
new version of an 80s game show. So maybe viewers can seek that out on ITV Player still if they want to see you smashing it with all the questions on there.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a prize, though. I'm glad it lived up to expectations.
Anyone in the UK, it was Alan Carr's epic game show, and it was series 3, episode 1, I think. Anyway, it was amazing. Yeah, and the prizes are legit, so fair play to them. But basically, the short version is, Jake, I hope you've warmed up your voice because you're going to have to do all of the talking this week because I got to the airport, and as I was about to board the plane last week, I saw that they had free newspapers on offer, and I thought, oh, shall I get a copy of the Financial Times? And I said, no, Connor, no Financial Times today. You're going to relax. You're switching off from work. I had my notifications off. So basically, Jake, I haven't got a clue what's been going on in the past week, though I have picked up 1 or 2 of the bigger stories. So, a lot of responsibility on your shoulders today. But let's say hello to a couple of people in the chat before we get started. Anyway, Lars says hello from Sweden. And Katie says, hola amigos, hola Katie, hello Lars from Sweden, how are you both? It's nice to have you with us today. Do let us know if you're joining us in the chat and say hello, and we'll get the conversation started.
Yeah, exactly, please do. Feel free to comment, as it's just me and Connor today. And like Connor said, he got back into the office yesterday, so he doesn't have a clue what's going on, which is great. Also, a big thanks to Clayton, our primary sponsors, and to Bombay Live, who make this stream possible every week. Should we get into it then, Connor?
Yeah, let's get into it, Jake. What do you know?
So I think there's only one place to start this week, and that is with the Gambling Commission's record ever punishment, which was a £19.2 million settlement for William Hill for multiple social responsibility and anti-money laundering failures. It was not a fine, Connor. Don't call it a fine.
No, it's not fine, and I would never refer to it as such. All it is an operator has broken the rules, the regulator has demanded money from them, and they have to pay it and also change their practices. How could that be described as a fine? Clearly, it's a settlement.
Exactly. Katie's saying, let's get the timer going. We can't miss tradition just because Nico is gone. But Katie, we're actually contractually obliged to not do 10 in 5 when Nico isn't here. It's part of his kind of brand deal with us, I'm afraid. He's in case he wants to sell himself elsewhere in the future. So we cannot do that, I'm afraid.
No,
Neither would we want to, because we wouldn't be able to do it justice.
No, exactly.
So biggest settlement ever, which is obviously quite a big deal. Now, it's worth pointing out that these are kind of historical failings again. So they happened before William Hill was owned by AAA, of course. Some of the failings in detail are pretty terrible. One included allowing one customer to open a new account and spend £23,000 in 20 minutes without any checks, which is absolutely shocking. And another failure saw them fail to conduct any checks while a different customer opened an account and spent £18,000 over the course of 24 hours. So, you know, as far as failings go, these are pretty much as bad as it gets in terms of social responsibility. Definitely falls foul of the Gambling Commission's guidelines on these issues. And there were also customers that were able to access William Hill online, or Mr. Green online, sorry, having previously excluded themselves from another brand in the William Hill portfolio, which is never good. So let's look at what the chief executive of the Gambling Commission said. He said, when we launched this investigation, the failings we uncovered were so widespread and alarming that serious consideration was given to license suspension, which is pretty dramatic words. But they said kind of the operator's reaction in this case and their, willingness to correct the mistakes as soon as they were alerted to them, perhaps saw them avoid that license suspension. And that's why a record settlement was dished out instead. But a few people have been asking, Connor, this week, whether the Gambling Commission will ever suspend a kind of top tier license, and if these failings aren't stark enough to do so, then what would be? What would your comments be on that?
Well, it has suspended some licenses in the recent past, but I saw some commentary on this, I think possibly on Twitter, talking about the fact that it's suspended. Did it suspend Bet at Home? I don't want to libel anyone and say the wrong company. It suspended, I believe, Bet at Home's license.
It did.
And another smaller company, I can't remember the details of, but I think the commentary that I was reading was essentially along the lines of, if you tried to suspend the likes of William Hill's license, the Gambling Commission would embroil itself in a legal dispute so enormously costly and long and difficult that I suppose it probably wouldn't be able to do much else if it was trying to deal with legal proceedings of that kind of that stature. There's no way that you got to imagine William Hill's got just as many, if not a great deal more, legal resources than the commission has on its side. and so it wouldn't look like a fair fight in all likelihood. And so I think that's part of the problem, is that they would just get so tied up in the legal proceedings that it's not even really practically possible for them to suspend the license of a firm that's so big and so powerful. The other thing is, really, I mean, it has had at least one change of ownership. Has it not had two changes in ownership since these failings? Oh, well, these were when it was owned by Caesars. So it has had a change of ownership since then, which kind of suggests that the people who are operating it now shouldn't necessarily be held responsible for the actions of the people who operated it previously. So I think there's a fair argument for that. But it's pretty galling. The figures are just ridiculous. I mean, to be able to spend tens of thousands of pounds with no source of funds checks, like spending 23 grand in 20 minutes, that's like getting on for average annual salary in the UK. You shouldn't be able to gamble that in 20 minutes without explaining where it's come from. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think from a customer's point of view as well, it's as concerning for customers as it is for the industry. You know, I think that all these kind of checks and balances should all be relative in a sense. Like, I'm sure there are people out there, obviously there are people out there who can afford to gamble £23,000 in 20 minutes, and that's up to them. For me, if I'm depositing 20 or 30 or 50 pounds at a time consistently with an operator, and all of a sudden I deposit £1,000, I want the operator to say something to me like, mate, are you sure you want to do that? Because that doesn't really seem like you. That's not really your betting behaviour. I don't think they would, because they don't really blink at £1,000. But for me, that would be a ridiculous amount for me to gamble. So
Yeah.
it's one of those.
No, you touched on a good point though, in that, you know, what might have been deemed affordable back then is probably very different to what is now, even at companies like William Hill and 888. But I think the commentary you were initially referring to is the article that caught my eye the most this week as well, and that was written by Rob Davies in the Guardian, and he basically asked the question, why won't the Gambling Commission suspend licenses? Rob Davies is a very good news reporter. He's a very fierce critic of the gambling industry, but he said all of this suggests that fines, usually deemed settlements, but let's call them what they are no deterrent. Take the £19.2 million penalty for 888, the company will make that back in less than 4 days of trading. Like you said, actually, in one of your columns, he says some might call it a cost of doing business. Now you said, I think you were saying kind of fines around 19 million might make operators stop and think twice, but actually, are they enough of a deterrent? And well, they're certainly not in comparison to a license suspension, for example. But
yeah,
he also makes that point that, you know, that threat of legal action could be so kind of restrictive to the Gambling Commission trying to carry out its primary objectives that they would rather just not go down that route at all. You did say that the commission had suspended some licenses before, and you are correct. But in the instance of Bet at Home and previous companies like Addison Global, for example, it's very often been because that operator's in serious financial difficulty or isn't able to fulfill its license requirements because of administration or those kind of things. It's very rarely because of social responsibility failings. There is one example, however, where they did suspend a license, and that was for Matchbook, which is the Irish sort of exchange operator. Let me just find out exactly when this was. So this was April 2020. They took the decision to suspend the license, and they said in one case a player was able to gamble a large sum of money over the course of 2 days without any interaction whatsoever, and another player who registered, played, and then self-excluded on the same day was subsequently able to reopen his account 6 months later. He then played for 10 hours a day on consecutive days and lost a large sum before self-excluding again without any monitoring or interaction taking place.
Yeah.
Again, dreadful failures, but I wouldn't say they were necessarily worse than the ones that the Gambling Commission has taken action against William Hill for.
Yeah.
And Rob Davies kind of makes this point in his piece that they're perhaps not picking and choosing their fights, but certainly, sort of using those powers on operators that have shallower pockets when it comes to litigation and that kind of thing. But from that matchbook ruling, Neil MacArthur said, he said, any operator that doubts that we're ready and willing to use the full range of our regulatory powers should think again. All operators need to learn lessons from this case, which kind of, at that time, you might have thought that more license suspensions would be forthcoming, because that was 3 years ago now. And we've always talked about, them ramping up their approach to enforcement and taking a stricter line, et cetera. But it seems they draw that line at license suspensions, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of typical of that. It's just something that happens across all industries. The regulators always 2 steps behind the industry, so they're always playing catch up, I suppose. But yeah, the column that I wrote that you referred to was this sort of, it was looking at the transition from fines in the hundreds of settlements in the hundreds of thousands to millions and tens of millions. And I think it's easy to dismiss and say, well, that's only 4 days of trading to AAA, and maybe it is, but still, you don't want to lose 4 days of trading just for the sake of it. And 19 million's going to hurt no matter which way you slice it. Probably doesn't do any good for shareholder confidence. So I think it's a tricky one, because I suppose the point of the Gambling Commission, almost in its own words, is something like creating a fair and safe gambling environment for everyone, something like this. And I think they're kind of pushing towards that. And I think there's definitely an argument that just suspending licenses isn't the best way to do it. Although we do have a huge number of licensees in the UK, we could do to shed a few. It wouldn't make that much of a difference to the choice on offering.
Well, just for the sake of it,
just thousands. Ridiculous. But do you know what I mean? I think there's definitely an argument to be made that just suspending licenses isn't the right way. Probably isn't the right way for them to go about that. So I think they're trying to find.
Yeah, and also we're not qualified to comment on that from a legal perspective. It might be that there is no legal stance on which the Gambling Commission can suspend a license. And the whole point is that any lawyer worth their salt would point that out pretty much immediately, and then that isn't a realistic course of action. So someone suggested that. I find this really interesting as well, that the Gambling Commission maybe knows it's limited in that respect. So in dishing out these kind of headline grabbing fines at a time when the government is still dragging its knuckles on the Gambling Act review is maybe a way of putting pressure on them to actually take a more kind of decisive stance on things and give the regulator either more powers of enforcement or more guidance. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I thought that was quite interesting. Perhaps this is, all they're able to do, and they're doing it to the best of their ability at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose so. We don't know. I suppose we don't know we don't really know how the Gambling Commission does its maths either. We get examples of the failings, but if you add up all the figures that you're given, it's £100,000 or something. So to have a 19 million settlement because of 100,000's worth of unchecked funds seems slightly unusual. I'm sure there's more to the story that we don't quite know. But yeah, what it is undoubtedly is an excuse for, or a reason for, the Gambling Commission once again to restate the fact that if it really has to, it will suspend licenses, and so it keeps telling us. But not something we see very often.
Yeah, and obviously Hills is now owned by AAA, and we're going to talk about them in a bit more detail. But it's worth pointing out that they were pretty much completely protected from this fine, because Hills, before it was acquired by 888, had already set aside 15 million from its own accounts towards the fine. Settlement, excuse me. And let's call them what they are, to borrow a phrase. But the other thing is that Caesars, which is the former owner of William Hill, actually had a liability in the acquisition terms, whereby if the license was suspended, Caesars would have had to cover the cost anywhere up to the region of 152 million. So, 888, despite being the current owners of the business, would not have been financially impacted from that.
Yeah.
Whereas license conditions like the settlement that we've seen, and also the they have to audit the business correctly now, have somebody on the board to oversee all this stuff, which comes with a cost. Caesars is also covering that up to a cost of 78 million. So, yeah, no kind of material impact on the bottom line of 888 at least, which will probably come as a relief because they are hardly having the best of times themselves.
Yeah,
we've spoken in some detail about kind of them taking up a rather precarious debt position to buy William Hill in the first place. Although that purchase price was reduced by about 250 million, I think, from what it was originally. So imagine what's the kind of situation they'd been in had that not happened. And then also, obviously, they've got no leadership at the moment. They don't have a chief executive because Itai Pazner was kind of made to step down following those VIP breaches in the Middle East. So they've got a chairman running the business and a CFO who was planning to leave and has had to stay on till the end of the year, and they've got a hell of a lot to deal with. So not a good time for 888 or its shareholders, you'd argue, at the moment. And I think, Connor, you've been looking in a bit more detail at their kind of how their share price has acted during that time as well.
Yes, the operative word there being a bit more detail. Yes, I think we've got a graphic on that we could probably put on the screen if Elizabeth can show us that graph on the back end. It's a pretty stark image, really. They were kind of pottering along in 2019 and 2020, bit of a dip in March 2020 there, same time as everyone had a bit of a dip, and then just recovered super, super strongly, absolutely flying up to an all-time high, I believe, share price of 458 pence on the 24th of September 2021. That was not long after they announced the acquisition of William Hill. But between announcing the acquisition in September 2021 and completing the acquisition in July 2022, you can see what happens there at the right-hand side of the chart. I mean, it's just been a kind of very swift collapse over the last sort of 18 months for 888, now trading at 53 pence. So, yeah, it doesn't look good from an investor's point of view. I remember speaking to somebody once upon a time in the banking sector who said that the acquisition basically took place at the exact wrong time, when valuations were super high and people were really optimistic, and then we kind of entered a bit of a bear market is sort of immediately after that, back end of 2021 coming into 2022. So I think the banks involved in that deal lost a lot of money as well. And yeah, I think the main concern, really, as you mentioned, is this kind of lack of leadership at the moment. Things not looking very good. I've just happened upon an article here that they were removed last week, removed from the mid-cap 250 and 350 indexes on the London Stock Exchange. So they're kind of falling off these large cap indexes and shrinking pretty quickly. What I didn't do prior to this broadcast, and what I should have done, was have a look at their latest financial results. But as I said, I didn't.
Let's not do that in real time.
Revenue slipped 2.6% in Q4, which is not good.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, we'll draw a line under 888 there, I think. So obviously regulatory woes in the UK, but there are also some happening in Germany, and it's a big shame that Nico's not here to join us for some commentary on this. But I wanted to shine a light on a LinkedIn post this week from a friend of our Gaming Next, Robert Lenshofer, who is the chief executive and co-founder of Hole Games. Apologies if I've butchered either of those pronunciations. But he is talking about the slots market and the casino market in Germany, which, as we know, has undergone a pretty substantial period of transition. And he's basically put a graph up that shows slots, basically the tax revenue from slots in Germany over the years from pre-regulation to regulation, and how it's kind of drastically declined. And the data that he's used and that the regulator is currently using would suggest a channelization rate for online casino of less than 50%. Which is pretty bad. But he also goes on to make the point that only around 28 licenses have been granted. And the biggest gripe from his perspective is just how slow that things are moving, because, they don't even have a full picture of data that they can use and go to the regulator and say, you're hamstringing yourself here by emboldening the black market, because they're just taking such a long time, basically, to license slots companies. Really interesting. What did you make of this graph, Connor?
Yeah, one of the really interesting figures for me is that, what did you say? Something like only 10% of submitted slot games have been approved. I think that's been quite a bit of a sticking point in the regulated German market, is that they have quite individual, quite unique requirements for slot games that aren't the same as other markets. So you end up with a massively reduced selection of games. I suspect you'll probably find that the 10% of games that have been approved have got quite similar functionalities to each other. You don't create an especially competitive market in that way if everyone's kind of limited to offering the same kinds of things. And it does appear to me that they are, what are they doing? I'm trying to find the right metaphor. They're doing something like shooting themselves in the foot here they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. Is that what they're doing? They're restricting things. They're restricting things so tightly that, in fact, I would say it's almost a no-brainer that a huge amount of traffic is going to remain in offshore markets, because why would you bother if you're a big casino enthusiast? There's just no point limiting yourself in that way when you know that there's a great deal of other offerings out there offering a great
lots of people making that point in the comments as well, because there's obviously not live casino in the regulation either, which is a massive omission if you are a keen casino player.
Casino as well.
So they had a disadvantage from the beginning, even without the slow process of signing off slot games and everything else. And Nico, although he can't be with us today, was quite active in the comments section. He was also talking about the sports betting regulation in Germany, which is a separate issue. But he pointed out that the regulator recently claimed a channelization rate of 95%, but they were only going off companies that paid taxes. So they still have 5% missing from companies that are even paying tax in Germany. And that doesn't include any that don't, any of the kind of offshore books that offer sports betting without paying tax to state coffers. So, yeah, a hell of a lot for the German regulators to work out on both sports betting and casino.
Yeah.
Not the most exciting market to be in at the moment. But Robert is great, by the way. He often posts really interesting insights to both LinkedIn and Twitter. So do go and follow him on both of those platforms. We'll have to get him on as a special guest one week as well, I think. Okay, I'm just catching up with the chat. So the next topic we've got is on DraftKings executive pay. Which is always a fascinating subject at this time of year.
Yeah, payday for these guys.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, the co-founders of DraftKings, there are three of them, saw their compensation skyrocket to 129 million for last year, which is more than triple what it was in 2021. Now, for the chief executive, Jason Robbins specifically, he received compensation of 47.5 million, which is up nearly 240% on 2021. But he's only been paying himself an annual salary, Connor, of $1. So,
yeah,
maybe
I
he's
was
entitled
inspired
to
by this
millions and
actually.
millions of
Yeah,
pounds.
I was gonna make the case to you. I'd be quite happy to reduce my salary to $1 if you could provide me with $40 million or so worth of stock options every year. Oh, and let's not forget $975,000 worth of private jet travel.
Yeah,
which is
exactly. Well, I think we've got the balance sheet here, so we can kind of break down those costs for you. So yeah, the one that
these are not even included in his that's not his like main compensation. This is the extra 2.5 million he spent in other compensation. Let's just point that
yeah.
out.
So what stands out to you there, Connor? Is it the private security? Is it the private jets, or is it the basically Super Bowl luxury experience?
Well, I was in New York, so I know what prices can be like in America. But I don't think a couple of hot dogs and a couple of beers at the Super Bowl would set me back 130 grand. That seems quite excessive. As for the security, he's the only one of the five people listed there who's got $1 million worth of security costs, and the others, I suppose, have been left to their own devices. Is this a sort
Yeah,
of
and I
Harry and
think we've got
scenario, or what?
I think we've got a funny tweet from Alan Bowden as well on this, which hopefully we can bring up. Not this one here. His account's private, so he'll probably be mad at us for sharing this. But here we go. I could not care less if Jason Robbins spent like a day's pay-per-click budget on going to the Super Bowl. I do find it mildly curious he needs $1 million for security, where fellow founders don't need a penny. I don't totally get this sort of private security thing either. To be perfectly honest with you, thanks for that, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Um,
But he's obviously concerned about his security. Obviously got a lot of money, so people like to attack people with lots of money, I suppose. But the other guys have got lots of money too, so I don't know why they haven't got the security or the private jet travel, which I'm sure is very luxurious and very nice.
Yeah, and it may surprise you, Connor, that Twitter was actually quite a polarized environment after these figures came out. So we had a range of views.
Twitter, is it?
No, I know. So the first tweet, which I think you've already shown briefly, Elizabeth, is a guy saying regular working man increases annual bonus if the company reaches its goals, should be the headline. So there we are. We are in the wrong to poke fun at DraftKings and Jason Robbins, because we would do the same, and that's a valid point if we were in that position.
Look, Jake, he's just a regular working man with his private team of bodyguards on his private jet. The regular guy.
Yes, he's a regular guy who keeps reiterating this thing that basically the DraftKings board has totally realigned management incentives, so that they'll be more efficient and they'll reach profitability quicker. Presumably, those are going to kick in 2023, because the 2022 results don't look like that. But basically, what they're going to do is make sure the incentives reflect EBITDA and profitability rather than just revenue. Which investors will be pleased to hear, I'm sure.
Yeah, and all those stock options that we talked about are a large proportion of them, as far as I know, are performance related, and they are related to they're tied to future targets that DraftKings has to hit in order for them to be able to vest.
Yeah, we've got a really funny tweet here that says exactly that, actually, a little exchange. that our viewers might like. So basically, Mo here, who I think is probably a DraftKings investor, points out a large portion of Jason's 47 million compensation you see for 2022 is not cash, but equity that only vests if DraftKings meets its targets in 2024 and 2026. So sad Barca fan, who probably wants to do a bit more research on this, says, what are those targets? So they're shared in document form. His reply is, I don't know how to read that shit to keep it absolutely 100, which I found absolutely hilarious. And I think probably more of us could do with some of sad Barca fans' humility from time to time. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we're kindred spirits. I'm not sure I know how to read it either. Always horribly formatted, these SEC documents, so you never know. You never know what to look for in there. But Jason keeps on banging that same drum about how confident he is in DraftKings' future. I remember maybe last year he said something about how investors who sell the stock are going to live to regret it. Well, yesterday he sold $5 million worth, so draw your own conclusions from that. Do you think he'll live to regret that decision? Or do you think
is that right? Did he? Right, because people keep saying on Twitter he needs to buy more of the stock.
300. He just sold 300,000 shares at $17 a piece for proceeds of about $5 million. Anyway, to keep it absolutely 100, Jake, I don't know how to read that bit. Sorry, I might have misunderstood it. Me and Chad Barton stand together in this one.
Yeah, appreciate your honesty. I just want to take a moment to say hello to Bogdan. To be honest with you, it's not felt the same, Bogdan, because you took half an hour to say hello to us this week. That's why we've been struggling along like we have been. You've given us a new lease of life. So hello to Bogdan. Thank you for joining us. So we've kind of touched on Twitter there as its own little ecosystem, but should we pivot onto our next topic, Connor, which is AI again and ChatGPT 4 and Mr. Twitter, Elon Musk, who's obviously the CEO, is one of a number of people in leading technology companies to have signed an open letter published yesterday that is basically requesting companies to stop this kind of crazy arms race in terms of AI technology until we know some more about basically the situation and what could happen in the future. Because at the moment we've heard obviously a lot about positive benefits and how ChatGPT is and how amazing AI is going to be in the future. But we possibly haven't stopped to think about, some consequences on the negative side. What did you make of this? Do you think they're right to sort of raise the alarm at this stage?
Well, it was signed by well over 1,000 people, every single one of which knows a lot more about artificial intelligence and technology than I do, I'm sure. I didn't actually have time to read that article earlier that Sonia, our colleague, published. I'm going to read that after our session just so I can make sure I get the full story. But the question I had, I did read the letter yesterday. If you want to have some fun related to Elon Musk, send a mail to press@twitter.com and see what you get in automated reply. Right, that's another fun task for us to do. Thank you, Bogdan. We'll have a go at that afterwards and see what we get. But what was I going to say about the open letter I read? It didn't set out. It didn't set out because. What didn't it set out? Sorry, I'm reading more comments now and getting distracted, Joe. You know me. I'm going to put us on full screen so I don't get so distracted.
Yeah. So I think the kind of standout statement from this letter said the recent months have seen AI labs locked in an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. So pretty strongly worded warning there. That,
What I wonder though is, but this is what I was going to say. It didn't set out what the specific dangers may be, and I suppose the reason for that is that we don't know yet, and I think that's part of the point of the letter. But are we talking about like an iRobot scenario? where the machine turn on us? Is that?
Well,
I mean, is
the
that?
language used is interesting, especially when you think, the majority of people that have co-signed this letter are indeed big AI proponents.
Yeah.
And one of the critics of this letter, Emily Bender, who's a computational linguist at the University of Washington, she described the letter as a hot mess that was dripping with AI hype. And she quite rightly pointed out that the risks, at least in her view, for AI are not about it being too powerful, but more about kind of the concentration of power in the hands of certain people, and reproducing kind of systems of oppression, and basically damaging the information ecosystem, because at the moment, not all the information it provides is true. Is that going to kind of further fuel this sort of post-truth society? Those are the concerns I think would have been sensible to raise at this point, because we had a bit of a discussion off air before this, Connor, and I think there are lessons to be learned here from kind of the ascent of social media, and how that burst onto the scene in the early noughties or whenever it was, as kind of a fun little internet tool, and then has basically influenced the outcome of political elections, and has all sorts of other sort of been put to all sorts of other nefarious uses. And I think AI could definitely go down that route if not managed carefully. So I do think it's good that we are approaching with caution at this early stage, because I think perhaps that was missing when it came to social media, and kind of putting an iPhone in everyone's pocket, and those kind of things. Because really, this has the power, as Bill Gates was saying in our latest edition of Hot Copy, if you missed that he puts this right on the level with the computer processor as kind of the next revolutionary thing in technology. So we really do have to think carefully about it.
Yeah. I think you're right. You said post-truth society. Is that what we live in now? I suppose it is. I think
Donald Trump was the inventor of that, I would say. But anyway, let's not get into that.
I suppose part of the danger, as you kind of alluded to, is that the most sort of data and information is becoming the most valuable resource in the world, in a sense, even, financially and practically. You can't, data used in the right way can allow you to do a great many things, I suppose. As you said, people have managed to influence elections and all sorts of different things. So I suppose the prospect of introducing, programs with the capability of presumably these programs will soon be able to create vast quantities of data. You could set up, it wouldn't be especially complicated to set up an AI that would generate, thousands or millions of social media accounts randomly, with AI generated faces of people who don't exist and AI generated names, and then create and publish and share misinformation intentionally, in order that's kind of intentionally trying to mislead people.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like we see bots do, at the moment.
It's already
artificial intelligence as well.
Well, the thing is, it's going to be, I suppose it's going to be a question of scale. If you can, if we have technology that can produce 100 lies for every fact that people put out, then it will be post-truth. Yeah, the facts will be inseparable from fiction, perhaps. I keep going through waves with this stuff. At first, when people started talking to me about ChatGPT, I thought, oh, please leave me alone. I do not want to know about it. Then when ChatGPT 4 came out a few weeks ago, I was like, I'm in. Plug me in. Get me in the matrix. This is good. This is very clever. And now I'm like starting to be a bit apprehensive again. I think that's probably the right way to approach it, to be fair. But yeah. I suppose the point of the letter is, like, there's literally no way of predicting what might happen. We're in quite a chaotic moment.
We are, and especially when you start thinking about you start putting commercial objectives as the priority of that rather than, and then you block everything out. Every other after effect comes secondary to that, and that's a really dangerous approach to anything really. But since ChatGPT came about, we've been asking people in the chat to share their experiences with the software, and we've been putting it through its paces as well at iGaming Next, especially since version 4 came out, which is miles better. And it actually helped us with its first news story this week, in the interest of full transparency. So I just thought it would be good to kind of explain to people a little bit about how we can use it as a news team, and maybe allay some of those fears about, are the robots taking over, etc. Because I think that commentary is quite misguided, because it can't do what humans can do, but it can certainly help you save your time and work in a more efficient manner. And that's what we were able to do this week with this story about Sport Radar and Snapchat, which have basically joined forces to do some programmatic advertising on behalf of US sports betting operators. And I was writing this story, and I thought, the thought that came into my head was that Snapchat users tend to be really young, right? They're sort of, I'm too old for Snapchat. I would never go on Snapchat. So Snapchat is definitely a much younger generation. And then I thought, well, if they're pushing sports betting ads, is there potentially, an issue there with reaching a demographic that is not of legal age to gamble online? So with the help of ChatGPT, I asked it for some figures and facts on Snapchat's user demographics. And it pointed out to me that its largest user group, is aged between 13 and 34, and that accounts for around 71% of the app's daily users. And it also gave me some really interesting statistics about where the app is most popular. So the US, for example, which is key when you're thinking about the marketing strategies of US sports betting operators. And not only was it able to provide those facts and figures, but it was also able to provide the source to me, so that I could kind of verify that myself. So you're not just taking, its word as gospel, because as we've just discussed, Connor, you don't know whether that's correct, incorrect, biased, whatever else. So yeah, it can definitely be used as an additional tool to improve efficiency. It isn't going to storm into our newsroom and become, the hottest new gaming journalist out there, and you write stories from scratch. Although it might overtake you in a couple of weeks, Connor. But
oh well, that's very nice.
No, I'm joking. You didn't deserve that at all. I apologize.
Not until ChatGPT 5 comes out, and I'm in the clear. I've got 6 months.
Yeah. Well, no, they've paused development on that because Elon Musk has asked them to. So there we go.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you'd like to touch on before we round off today's show?
No. I went to the opera last night. Would you like to hear about that? I told you I don't know anything about the gambling news. It was very strange, Jake. It was very strange, and I didn't like it, and I won't be going back.
Oh, really? Yeah, you're not a converted opera fan.
No, not really. No, it was the English National Opera at the Coliseum Theatre in London, which is an extremely beautiful theatre, and they had very good music, but I couldn't see the band, and the whole thing was just about ancient Egypt, and I didn't really get it.
Was it long? Because that's what I tend to hear about operas.
It was approximately 3 hours in length. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it had 3 halves. You had the first half, then half time, and the second half, and then another half time, and then the third half. And I didn't really.
Surely there can only be one half time, but anyway, I went.
Oh, that's what I thought, mate, but apparently not. No. Anyway, it turns out I'm not as cultured as I thought, but there you go. It's always good to learn.
Well, you tried, Connor. That's the most important thing. Don't knock it till you tried it. Now you have.
And now I will knock it.
What's the DraftKings guy at the opera too? That's one of the comments that just come in. Jason Robbins, I'm guessing they're talking about. He probably would have flown over to Venice on his private jet, I expect, for the opera. He won't be sitting in the cheap seats with Connor.
No, certainly not.
No. All right. Well, thank you very much, Connor, for that little story to end the show with. Uh, and thanks a lot to our commenters, as always. You've really kept us company nicely. Big thank you to Playson for sponsoring and to Bombay Live. And we'll be back with you at the same time next week. And shout out to our producer, Elizabeth, who does an amazing job behind the scenes, and I never get a chance to say it. So well done to Elizabeth as well.
You always have a chance. You just always forget. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Summer, step into the Mediterranean haven of Malta. Crystal clear waters, ancient ruins, and towering cliffs. The iGaming industry is converging in Malta to take on everything from green courses, the hottest tournament tables, courts, lanes, and of course, the UNESCO city of Valletta for iGaming Next 2023. A week-long festival experience rounding up with the biggest high-end European pool party, Showers, celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Join over 4,000 senior delegates and top affiliates from all around the world alongside industry giants for an unforgettable iGaming festival week. iGaming Next 2023. Contact our sales team for sponsorship opportunities.